Imagine sending your child off on a school trip, a simple field trip, a chance to learn and have fun. Then imagine that child never comes home. Not just your child, but the entire class. The teacher, the bus driver, everyone, gone, vanished into thin air. For 27 years, no answers. No bodies. No closure. The case went cold. Everyone gave up hope. Almost everyone. One mother refused to let go. And one day, while looking through old photographs, she spotted something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that it had been overlooked for nearly 3 decades. That single detail would shatter a decades-old lie and expose a nightmare far darker than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of Laura Calloway, her daughter Rory, and the truth that waited 27 years to be found. September 28, 2023, the day of remembering. Laura Calloway woke up to gray skies. The clouds hung low over her small house in a quiet Virginia neighborhood, matching the heaviness in her heart. She had known this day was coming. She had tried to prepare herself, but the pain of losing her daughter never got easier. It only changed shape. Today marked exactly 27 years since Rory Calloway had disappeared. Rory was only 10 years old when she climbed onto a yellow school bus with her classmates and never returned. Laura had spent more than half her life grieving, searching, hoping. She had learned to function, to smile at the grocery store, to attend neighborhood barbecues without breaking down. But deep inside, a wound remained open. Laura sat up in bed and walked to her dressing table. Hanging from the mirror was a close-up photograph of Rory in her school uniform. Her hair was braided. Her smile was wide and carefree. Laura took the photo into her trembling hands and whispered her daughter's name. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she quickly wiped them away. She had learned to cry quickly and recover faster. There was no other way to survive. After washing her face and getting dressed, Laura checked her phone. There was a message from her best friend, Helen Carter. Helen had also lost a daughter that same day, Sally, who was Rory's classmate and best friend. The two women had become anchors for each other over the years. Helen's text read, "You are not alone in this. All of us still remember. If you need company, come over anytime." Laura felt a small surge of comfort. She replied that she would come right away. Then she went to the kitchen and gathered a few packets of Earl Grey lavender tea and a jar of homemade cookies. She couldn't bear to show up empty-handed, even at her best friend's house. The walk to Helen's house was short, just a few blocks through a quiet neighborhood that had changed very little in 27 years. The same trees lined the sidewalks. The same mailboxes stood at the ends of driveways. But Laura's life was completely different. She had been a hopeful young mother back then. Now she was a woman shaped by loss. Helen greeted her at the door with a warm hug before Laura could even knock. "Come in," Helen said softly. Her eyes were red, but she was holding up. They moved to the kitchen, where Helen boiled water for tea. The comforting aroma of Earl Grey and lavender filled the air. Laura settled onto the living room sofa, the same sofa where they had shared countless conversations about their missing children over the years. "How are you doing?" Helen asked gently as she poured the hot water into 2 cups. Laura sighed, her eyes downcast. "I'm trying to keep it together. You know how this day is. Always the hardest." Helen nodded. "It's the same for me. I finished my therapy last year. I've accepted the past, and I've tried to let go of all the what-ifs that used to eat me alive. But I can't pretend this day isn't still painful. Sometimes I wonder if I need to go back to therapy." They sipped their tea in silence for a moment, the weight of shared grief hanging between them. Then Helen said, "My psychologist told me something that really helped. She said we should face our pain whenever it comes and accept it as part of ourselves, not try to hide from it or push it away." She paused and then added, "I was thinking, maybe we could look at some photos together, if you're up for it. Photos of the girls." Laura took another sip of tea. The warmth soothed her. After a moment, she nodded. "I think that might be good." Helen stood up and walked to the TV cabinet. She pulled out a thick photo album and brought it back to the sofa. They sat close together, side by side, as Helen opened the first page. The photos were a time capsule of happier days. Children's first days of school, birthday parties with colorful cakes, family picnics in the park. Laura and Helen found themselves sharing stories, their voices mixing laughter with tears. Do you remember when Rory and Sally first started at that school? Laura asked, pointing to a picture of the two girls in their matching uniforms. Helen smiled wistfully. Grade 5, wasn't it? The school had only been open for 2 years at that point. That's right, Laura confirmed. The class was so small at first, just 6 students. But by the end of that year, it had grown to 15. The school really put a lot of effort into marketing. Discounted fees, open houses. They did whatever it took to attract parents. They continued flipping through the pages. Then Laura saw a photo she had never encountered before. It showed Rory and Sally, along with several of their classmates, gathered around a science project during the school's annual science fair. The children's faces were bright with enthusiasm. None of them knew that tragedy was just around the corner. "This picture is beautiful," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get it?" Helen explained. "I received it from the police a few months ago. Since the case went cold, they allowed parents to collect copies of evidence materials. I went down to the station and requested everything they had." Laura was surprised. "I didn't know we could do that. If I had known, I would have asked for copies too." Helen gave her a sad smile. "Maybe it's better that you didn't, honestly. Having all that evidence has made it harder for me to move on. That's part of why I needed therapy. I spent so many sleepless nights poring over those files, looking for something, anything, that might give us answers." As they turned more pages, Laura came across another unfamiliar image. This one was a class picture taken in front of a yellow school bus. The same bus that had carried the children on that fateful trip to Big Bend Park. A trip from which none of them ever returned. Laura studied the photo intensely. Her eyes scanned every face. The children, the teacher, the bus driver. Then she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. "Who is this?" she said, pointing to a woman standing near the bus. "Why is Principal Lillian Brooks in this picture? I thought Mr. Gregory, the classroom teacher, went alone with the kids and just one support staff member that day." Helen leaned in to look more closely. "You know, I'm not entirely sure. I remember hearing rumors from some other parents that the staff member was actually the principal. But I never gave it much thought." Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. For 27 years, she had believed that only the teacher and a co-teacher or administrative staff member had accompanied the children. The presence of Principal Brooks in this photograph raised questions she had never considered before. She opened her mouth to voice her concerns, but Helen gently placed a hand on her arm. "Laura," Helen said softly, "I know that look in your eyes. We've been down this road before, dozens of times, thinking we found something crucial. It's not good for us to cling to false hope." Laura wanted to argue. She wanted to insist that this detail could be important. But she saw the concern in Helen's eyes. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the surge of emotions within her. "You're right," she said finally, though a part of her still clung to the nagging doubt. "It's probably nothing." Helen gave her a sympathetic smile and turned back to the photo album. "Look," she said, pointing to the bus in the background. "This photo was most likely taken before the trip on school grounds. That would explain why the principal was there. She was just seeing them off." Laura nodded, but she was not entirely convinced. She glanced at the clock on the wall and realized they had been talking for almost an hour. "Helen, I hate to do this, but I should probably get going," Laura said, standing up. "I want to visit Rory's grave, bring her some flowers, tidy up a bit. I do it every year, you know." Helen nodded in understanding. "Of course. Would you like some company? Sally's grave is in the same area." Laura appreciated the offer but saw the hesitation in Helen's eyes. "That's kind of you, but I know you prefer to go with Matthew later. I'll be all right." As Laura prepared to leave, she paused and turned back to Helen. "Would it be all right if I took that photo with me? The one with the school bus?" Helen seemed to consider it for a moment before nodding. "Of course. But Laura, promise me you won't let this consume you. We can't afford to go down that rabbit hole again." Laura assured her friend that she would be careful. But as she left Helen's house and walked toward the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something important. The image of Principal Lillian Brooks standing with the children before their ill-fated trip burned in her mind. It was a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit with the story she had been told for 27 years. An impulsive decision. Laura stood at the bus stop, clutching the photograph in her hands. The sky above her grew darker, threatening rain. She checked the timetable and saw that the next bus wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes. Then she looked up and realized where she was. This neighborhood was near the principal's house, the old Victorian on Maple Street. Laura hadn't been there in years, but she remembered it clearly from the time she and other parents had gathered outside to protest after the investigation went cold. Before she could talk herself out of it, Laura started walking. The neighborhood had changed over time. Some houses had been renovated. Others showed signs of neglect. But when she finally found herself in front of a familiar house with a well-maintained garden and neatly trimmed hedges, her heart began to pound. A car was parked in the driveway, but Laura couldn't be sure if Principal Brooks still lived here, or if she was even home. She walked up to the porch and knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Nothing. Feeling embarrassed and foolish, she was about to turn away when she noticed two women walking along the sidewalk. One appeared to be in her mid-30s, the other older, closer to Laura's age. As they turned onto the walkway leading to the house, their eyes met Laura's. Laura immediately recognized the older woman as Lillian Brooks. Time had added lines to her face and softened the sharpness of her features, but there was no mistaking her. The principal didn't seem to recognize Laura at first. Her expression was polite but questioning. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious. Laura swallowed hard.
I'm Laura Calloway.
Principal Brooks froze. For a split second, her composure slipped. She began to stammer. "Oh, Mrs. Calloway, please, just give me a moment." She turned to the younger woman and ushered her toward the house. "Why don't you go inside and make yourself comfortable? I'll be right there." The younger woman disappeared through the front door. Principal Brooks fumbled with her keys, unlocked the door, and followed her inside. Laura stood on the porch, waiting. Through the still open door, Laura could hear faint murmuring. The principal was speaking to the young woman. Laura debated whether to call out or simply wait. But as the minutes stretched on, impatience crept in. She knocked again. Footsteps. Then the door swung open wider. Lillian Brooks reappeared, wiping her hands on her blouse as if she had just finished washing them. "I'm so sorry for the wait," she said, forcing a small chuckle. "Forgive me, but your name sounds familiar, and yet I can't quite place it." Laura inhaled deeply. "I'm Rory Calloway's mother. My daughter was in the 5th grade class of 1996. She vanished during the school trip." The principal's face paled. She struggled to maintain her smile, but Laura could see nervousness in her darting eyes. She glanced over her shoulder at the young woman still lingering inside. I'm no longer the school principal," Lillian said, her voice shaky. "I took early retirement some years ago. May I ask why you're here?" Laura decided to be direct. "I have a question about the day of the school trip. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced. I was in the area and it came to mind. I won't take much of your time." Lillian glanced over her shoulder again. "All right, but I can't stay long. I have a guest waiting." Laura nodded and pulled the class photo from her purse. "This picture, was it taken at the school or during the trip?" Principal Brooks narrowed her eyes, studying the image. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought. "I think it was during." She stopped abruptly. No. It was taken at the school parking lot, before the trip." Laura's heart skipped at the hesitation. "Were you on the trip that day?" Lillian shook her head firmly. "No. I stayed at the school. Mr. Gregory, the classroom teacher, and a staff member from administration went on the trip. It was supposed to be me, but I had an important last-minute matter to attend to, so the admin took my place." Laura processed this. It aligned with what she had always believed. Still, something felt off. She decided to ask one more question. "Did you notice anything suspicious about Mr. Gregory that day? Anything at all?" At this, Lillian's demeanor changed. Her voice took on an edge of annoyance. "No, Mrs. Calloway. I've given these statements to the police countless times. I never would have thought Mr. Gregory capable of something like this." Then her expression softened slightly. "I would prefer not to speak about it anymore. It was heartbreaking for me too. I found closure. I don't want to open old wounds again." Laura felt a pang of guilt.
I'm sorry.
"I understand. It's just, I still can't believe my daughter just disappeared into thin air." To her own surprise, Laura felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what I hoped for. Maybe that you'd have an answer after all this time." She reached into her purse for a tissue. As she dabbed at her eyes, she noticed the young woman inside watching them intently. There was a mix of curiosity and concern in her gaze. Principal Brooks stepped forward and briefly embraced Laura. "I understand the pain, Mrs. Calloway. It's one of the reasons I took early retirement. As long as I worked at that school, I could never overcome the grief." She paused. "I know that today marks 27 years. You're not the first parent to come here on this day over the years." Laura was taken aback. She thanked Lillian for her time and turned to leave. But as she walked back toward the bus stop, her mind raced. The principal's initial hesitation, the presence of the mysterious young woman, the subtle inconsistencies, they all gnawed at her. But maybe Helen was right. Maybe she was just reopening old wounds for nothing. The cemetery encounter. The rain that had been threatening all day finally began to fall. Laura took shelter under the awning of a shop near the florist. She debated whether to call the police officer who had been assigned to the case years ago, Detective Jensen. She pulled out her phone and stared at it, but no call came. No message. She sighed and slipped the phone back into her bag. The rain let up slightly, and Laura made a run for the florist shop. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. The warm, fragrant air wrapped around her like a blanket. "Mrs. Calloway," the florist, Sarah, said. "I was wondering if we'd see you today." Laura managed a small smile. "Hello, Sarah. I'm here for my usual order." As Sarah gathered the flowers Laura typically chose for Rory's grave, Laura scanned the shop selection. The variety seemed less extensive than in previous years. Sarah explained apologetically, "I'm sorry we don't have as much variety this year. The weather's been unpredictable, and it's affected our suppliers." Laura nodded. "It's all right. I'm sure we can still put together something beautiful for Rory." Just then, the bell chimed again. Laura turned to see Helen and her husband, Matthew, entering the shop. Helen's eyes widened in surprise. "Laura," Helen said, approaching, "I thought you'd have gone to the florist earlier. Is everything all right?" Laura hesitated, unsure how much to share about her visit to Principal Brooks's house. "I got a bit sidetracked," she said finally, "but it's good to see you both again." The three of them arranged their flowers, Laura for Rory, Helen, and Matthew for Sally. The task was soothing, allowing Laura's mind to wander back to her encounter with Lillian Brooks. Should she tell Helen? Would her friend think she was grasping at straws again? As they finished and paid for their bouquets, Laura made a decision. She would keep it to herself for now. But the image of the young woman in Lillian's house lingered in her mind. They drove to the cemetery together. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a fresh, clean scent. The ground was soft beneath their feet as they walked through the rows of headstones. Laura knelt beside Rory's tombstone. She placed the flowers gently at its base and ran her fingers over the engraved name. It always tore at her heart that this tombstone marked an empty grave. No body beneath it, no real closure. But they had needed somewhere to direct their grief, somewhere tangible to visit. She pulled out the worn class photograph and studied her daughter's face. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she let herself grieve, the pain as raw as the day it had all happened. After a while, Laura wiped her tears and stood up. She turned to join Helen and Matthew, who were standing by Sally's grave a few feet away. But then something caught her eye. In the distance, near the plot where most of the missing children were buried, stood a familiar figure. It was the young woman from Principal Brooks's house. She wasn't just passing through. She was standing perfectly still, staring down at a headstone, her hands clasped together as if in quiet contemplation. Laura's pulse quickened. Was this a coincidence? Or something more? Without a second thought, she murmured to Helen, "I'll be right back," and walked briskly toward the young woman. As she approached, Laura could see that the woman was crying. Her shoulders shook as she stood in front of one of the graves. "Excuse me," Laura called out softly. The woman turned. Surprise and fear flashed across her face as she recognized Laura. She quickly wiped her tears away. "We meet again," Laura said. "I think I saw you at Principal Lillian's house earlier." The woman lowered her eyes, shifting uncomfortably. She looked as though she wanted to retreat. "I don't mean to intrude," Laura added quickly. The woman exhaled softly. "It's okay. I come here every year on this day to grieve." Laura nodded in understanding. "So do I, though I usually visit early in the morning. But today I was late." A silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then Laura gently asked, "Who are you grieving for? Were you related to one of the students who went missing 27 years ago?" The woman hesitated. Then she gave a slow, almost reluctant nod. Laura's eyes drifted toward the tombstone. There, leaning against the stone, was a small framed photograph. The image was blurred by age, but Laura could make out the outline of a young girl's face. The woman followed Laura's gaze and quickly snatched up the photograph, clutching it to her chest. "I'm sorry," Laura said softly. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy." She took a step back, preparing to leave. But just as she turned, the woman called out, "Wait!" Laura paused. "Why did you go to Principal Lillian's house earlier?" the woman asked, her voice uncertain but firm. Laura turned fully to face her. She studied the woman's expression. There was something more than curiosity in her eyes. Something cautious, something almost fearful. "I was asking about the day of the school trip," Laura admitted. "I wanted to know if she was there when the students left, or if she went with them." She reached into her purse and pulled out the now slightly crinkled photograph. "My friend Helen showed me this picture earlier. I had never seen it before. It confused me because I didn't remember Principal Lillian being there that day." The woman stared at the picture, her grip tightening on her own framed photograph. Then, to Laura's surprise, a chuckle escaped her lips, light, yet laced with sorrow. But then her gaze lingered on one face in particular. Tears slipped down her cheeks. In a hushed whisper, she said, "Rory was such a brat." Her tone was not one of hatred. It held a bittersweet warmth. Laura's ears perked up. "Did you know Rory?" she asked, urgency creeping into her voice. The woman seemed startled, as if she hadn't expected anyone to catch her words. She returned the class picture to Laura with trembling hands. "I'm Rory's mother," Laura said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. "Do you know something about Rory?" The woman froze, her posture suddenly defensive. Confusion washed over Laura as she noticed the woman's eyes dart toward the framed photograph she still clutched against her chest. The resemblance between the woman and the girl in the frame was striking. "Who are you?" Laura asked slowly. "Are you this girl?" The woman's response was immediate and vehement. "No." But the fear in her voice suggested otherwise, as if she was trying to mask a deeper truth. "It's okay," Laura said softly, stepping closer. "You don't need to be scared. Are you one of the survivors?" The woman shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. But the speed of her denial only reinforced Laura's suspicion. "I think you're mistaken," the woman insisted. "That's not me." Laura's voice was firm yet compassionate. "No. You know it is you. It's 100% you." The woman's shoulders sagged. She looked defeated. "You don't want to know who I am. It's better for everyone involved." "Please," Laura pleaded, desperation in her voice. "For all these years, I've never been able to understand my daughter's disappearance. It's been eating me alive. I come here every year to honor her, and after a few months, the pain in my heart eases. But then this day comes around, and it's like a cycle, an endless torment on my soul." Tears welled up in her eyes. "If you know anything, please tell me." The woman's eyes flickered with emotion. Laura pressed on, her voice growing steadier. "Why were you at Principal Lillian's house earlier? You can't be her daughter." "I know Lillian doesn't have a daughter." The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. The woman's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, it felt as if the world had paused. Then, finally, she relented. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You're right. I'm one of the missing students. A survivor." Laura's heart raced. Disbelief washed over her. "What?" The woman's voice trembled. "My name is Audrey Whitman." Laura gasped. Audrey's name had been etched into a tombstone she had passed countless times during her visits. A haunting reminder of the tragedy. But now here she was, alive. "You were in my daughter's class," Laura murmured, struggling to keep her composure. "Did your family know you were alive?" Audrey shook her head.
No.
That's why I come to the grave later in the day. My parents always come in the morning. Laura recalled seeing Audrey's parents at the cemetery over the years, always at that same hour, their faces etched with grief. Why didn't you come back home? Laura asked gently. Audrey's voice cracked. I'm too broken. It's a long story. Laura's heart ached for the young woman before her, burdened by a past she couldn't escape. You don't have to share it all with me. But please, please, I'm begging you, turn yourself into the police. Give them your testimony. Audrey shook her head vehemently.
No.
The principal said I'd only hurt everyone. Dozens of families. Laura felt a shock run through her. Principal Lillian Brooks knew you were alive all this time? And she discouraged you from coming forward? Audrey nodded, her voice cracking. I trusted her. She was the only one who understood my pain. Laura's voice was firm. Audrey, pain is living in the unknown. And we're all already in pain. Couldn't get any worse than this. Your testimony could help us find closure. Could save us all. Audrey looked up, searching Laura's face for sincerity. Really? Laura nodded fervently. Yes, you would be helping every victim's family. Please, Audrey. After a prolonged silence, Audrey took a shaky breath. She reached for her phone. I think you're right. I've wrestled with this decision for a long time. But Lillian always discouraged me, and I believed she had her reasons. Seeing you here now, I'll call the police. As they waited for the officers to arrive, Laura's desperation clawed at her throat. Audrey, please, do you know where my daughter Rory is? Audrey's expression shifted to one of deep sadness. She nodded slowly, her gaze heavy with unspoken sorrow. What do you mean? Laura pressed, her heart pounding. Where is she? Just then, Helen and Matthew approached. Laura, what's going on? Who is this? Laura took a deep breath. Helen, Matthew, this is Audrey Whitman. She was on the bus that day. She's alive. Before Audrey could respond, the distant wail of police sirens pierced the air. Audrey flinched, her instincts urging her to flee. But Laura's voice broke through the chaos. Audrey, if you loved Rory and Sally, you owe it to them to tell the truth. Audrey paused, her feet rooted in place. She turned to face Laura, Helen, and Matthew. She saw the confusion etched on their faces and the desperation in Laura's eyes, a lifeline amidst her turmoil. Okay, Audrey finally said, her voice trembling but resolute. I'll talk. But at the station, the interrogation, 2 police officers arrived. They approached Audrey, confirming that she was the one who had called. What's your name? One officer asked. Audrey stood up straight. Audrey Calloway, Actually, my name is Audrey Whitman. I'm one of the survivors of the missing children from 27 years ago. The officers exchanged glances. One of them radioed the station, requesting a system check on her name. Then they turned to the small group. We need everyone to come with us to the station. No disturbances here. Laura, Helen, and Matthew followed in their own car. Inside, Laura couldn't hold back. She recounted everything to her friends. The revelation about Audrey, the principal's knowledge of a survivor, and how it all felt like a sinister puzzle with missing pieces. Matthew frowned. Why would the principal keep something like that from us? I don't know, Laura admitted. But whatever truth Audrey holds, it must be significant enough that it could put Lillian in danger. At the station, Laura spotted Detective Jensen, the same officer she had tried to reach earlier. He approached them apologetically. I'm sorry I couldn't take your call earlier. I was tied up with an urgent case. Laura's voice was urgent. Officer, you need to take this seriously. Audrey has confessed that she's a survivor. She's finally ready to talk. Detective Jensen's demeanor shifted. If that's true, we'll reopen the case. He led Audrey into an interview room. Laura, Helen, and Matthew waited anxiously in the sterile waiting area. The confession. Not long after, the police station buzzed with activity. Officers received orders and moved with urgency. A unit was dispatched to Principal Lillian Brooks's house with an arrest notice. Hope flickered in Laura's chest. Audrey must have shared everything. Less than an hour later, the officers returned, leading a handcuffed Lillian Brooks into the station. She walked with her head down, her shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, she mumbled as she locked eyes with Laura, Helen, and Matthew. but the officers pushed her forward, guiding her toward the booking area. Hours crawled by. Then an officer emerged from the interview room and beckoned Laura, Helen, and Matthew to join him. Inside, Audrey sat at a table, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. The officer wasted no time. Principal Brooks has confessed. She was the one who organized the entire class trip. She framed Mr. Gregory to take the fall. She was under immense pressure. Debts she couldn't pay, and the loan sharks were dangerous. They threatened her family. Laura's breath caught. The trip to Big Bend Park was sabotaged, the officer continued. Brooks conspired with kidnappers. The bus driver was killed, his body never found. The teacher and all the children were abducted and transported to a border area in Mexico. From there, they were trafficked into another country. He hesitated. The female students were targeted for various forms of exploitation by Mexican gangsters. The male students were sold overseas for child labor. Laura felt her stomach twist into knots. Helen and Matthew looked equally stunned, their faces pale. Audrey spoke up, her voice trembling. I was the only one who made it out alive. 12 years ago, I managed to escape from the man who had purchased me, but I was too traumatized to face my parents. Somehow, I connected with Principal Brooks. She helped me build a new life, paid for my apartment, covered my living expenses. But in return, I couldn't tell anyone the truth. She said it would only add to the family's distress. Laura's heart raced. What about the other children? Did anyone else survive? My Rory? Audrey shook her head slowly. I honestly don't know about the others. We were mostly split up. But I remember Rory and Sally didn't make it. Rory died the day of the kidnapping from an overdose. They gave her too much of whatever sedative they used. Sally was next. They didn't get the dosage right for her either. At those words, Laura and Helen broke down in tears. Their grief crashed over them like a tidal wave. Audrey murmured, I'm so sorry. This is what I feared most. Principal Lillian was right. But Laura, wiping away her tears, shook her head firmly. You did the right thing, Audrey. This is painful, yes, but we finally have closure. We can start healing now. Detective Jensen spoke up. With this new evidence, we can reopen the case. Thanks to you, Audrey, we might be able to locate some of the other students. We're filing charges against Lillian Brooks and have already contacted authorities in Mexico. He turned to Audrey. We're offering you witness protection. The trafficking ring will likely try to locate you again. Laura, Helen, and Matthew listened as the officer outlined the next steps. When they finally left the station, the fading light of day cast long shadows across the parking lot. Laura looked at Helen and Matthew and saw the same complex emotions reflected in their eyes. The truth was painful, but it was also, in its own way, a relief. What now? Helen asked softly. Laura took a deep breath. Now we honor our children's memory by making sure justice is served, and we help Audrey build the new life she was denied for so long. As they walked to their car, Laura felt a shift within herself. The grief was still there, a constant companion after all these years. But alongside it was a sense of purpose, a determination to see this through to the end. For Rory, for Sally, for all the children lost that day, and for Audrey who had survived against all odds. The road ahead would be long and painful, but for the first time in 27 years, Laura felt like she was finally on the path to answers, and perhaps, eventually, to a kind of peace she had thought forever out of reach.